I'm Sheena Miller with Smithers Bikes, and we're here just preparing a webinar for you today. And Smithers Bikes is really just a community group based out of Smithers, BC, with a passion for cycling, active transportation, and trying to get more people safely on bikes. We just really celebrate the joy of cycling. So just around the corner is GoByBike BC Week. You can see the poster in the background here. That runs from May 31st to July 6th, which lends us the perfect opportunity to have a little conversation right now about some cycling preparedness, safety, all different things that are, kind of around that safety theme. So today we're thinking about cycling CPR, rules of the road, bike handling, some brain injury conversation, and we've got 3 experts on our panel here today to answer some questions and just to go over a little bit of review and some key take-home messages here. We're going to try and keep this webinar down to about 45 minutes, and all 3 of our speakers will leave you, we'll get you their email addresses after this so you can follow up if you have any questions or thoughts. Our first speaker today is Ty Parkin. Ty is a community paramedic out of Grand Isle Station 765 with BC Emergency Health Services, and he's going to go over a 20-minute cycling CPR safety webinar, and I'll just give him a little bit more of an introduction here. So Ty has been a paramedic with the BC Emergency Health Services for 5 years, and has mostly has been in the position of community paramedic for Grand Isle. Is it Tackett and Fort Babine? So some interesting communities there. He's had the pleasure of working.
Spread out.
Okay, yeah, he's had the pleasure of working around BC Northwest Territories, and so quite remote communities, I imagine. And now he currently resides in Grand Isle. So some of the things that he works on are home health support, community outreach. That's why he's hence on the call today. And emergency medical coverage alongside some other great health professionals in this field. So over to you, Ty. Why don't you go over your cycling CPR piece, and then I'll invite our other experts here, Lauren Dohler and Matt Davey, to respond or jump in there as they like, and then we'll give them their introductions in a little bit.
Well, thank you for the glowing introduction there, Sheena. Much appreciated. And a big thank you to everybody for being a part of this today. It's always exciting to be able to be asked to be a part of the community, even from a distance over Zoom like this. So today I have a quick little presentation. Should take us about 20 minutes in general. I wanted to try to keep it open again so that everybody can try to have a bit of a input as we go through here. So again, as Sheena mentioned, I am a primary care paramedic. I was working as a community paramedic now here in lovely Grand Isle. Just off Highway 16, and it is my pleasure to be with you today to talk about the kind of safety provided by being prepared for the most common emergencies. Being on your bike is a pretty fantastic way to stay fit, work your body and your mind, and as a way to experience some of the most breathtakingly beautiful parts of the province here. Events like this kind of remind us that we are a part of an active and a supportive community, and no matter what your cycling preference, is it trail riding, highway miles, or just heading down the street to the grocery store, everyone can really benefit from a little bit of forethought and planning to keep yourself and your fellow riders safe. So next little while, I wanted to go through a little bit of a simulated process of preparing for a day's trip, from knowing the kind of trip that you're planning on taking and getting yourself an efficient, lightweight first aid kit that can help you in most emergencies, how to think ahead in your journey and on the trail to avoid major injuries before they happen, and how to prepare to help someone else or yourself in case of the worst case scenario. If the worst happens and you need to provide emergency medical care, the worst that you kind of want to look out for is CPR or cardiopulmonary resuscitation. So practice is always a really important part of making sure you're an efficient practitioner. After these heavy topics, we'll kind of summarize everything we've learned together. I'll make sure to leave my contact information, so if you have any follow-up questions or conversations, I'll be here for it. Now, one of the best ways to prepare for your cycling trips is to know exactly where it is you're going. And following that logic, it's also very important that someone you trust also has that same information and a plan to check in with you to make sure that you're safe and sound at an expected time. A line that I put into this presentation multiple times is to know your trail, know where you're going, and be able to give directions to where you are. Whether you're outdoors in the woods or on the highway, you should prepare for what's ahead. And this means having the right clothes, the spare equipment for that unexpected flat tire, and giving yourself time to do a full check of your equipment, including your bike and helmet, to check for freight straps or worn connections. Since cycling is such a great workout for the body, make sure that you're ready to replace the fuel that you're burning with thoughtful snacks like energy bars that are lightweight to pack but heavy in energy to keep you going. One item of utmost importance is to make sure that you're prepared to keep yourself hydrated. That's one item where you really have to prioritize having it over worrying how much you're going to pack and how heavy it's going to be. So since I'm here to talk to you about safety on the trail, I kind of leave the equipment and the helmet check to the other guests on the presentation today. That's fair warning for you guys. Instead, I wanted to focus on a few items that you can plan to have in your first aid kit that can really make a difference when that unexpected thing happens. So in the mindset of keeping your kit light but effective, it's good to prepare a kit that you're familiar and comfortable with so you can get the most out of your emergency supplies. Even if you're the trail MacGyver who can fashion a tourniquet from a spare tire and a stick, having the right equipment to do the job can really make a big difference when you're stabilizing and supporting someone who's injured. Some of the more versatile and widely applicable items you can pack are compress and sling bandages. In case of bleeding, securing and stabilizing and supporting breaks, a strong sterile bandages bought at your local pharmacy or your first aid store can be a huge benefit in a lot of situations where you need to stop bleeding and keep open wounds from being infected. The same way that a roll of medical tape or even duct tape for those red-green fans out there, it can be easily packed and used to avoid injuries and keep them secure and splinted. A roll of tape can be used to provide cover and keep injuries dry and patch broken equipment. Next up, a quick way to cut through material, an easy to use item is a hardy and sharp knife, straightforward from the Cub Scout days. These can be used to cut strips of bandages and sticks, fashion a splint in a tough situation. A small but effective survival knife can have a flint and steel for overnight or long stays on trips and help create fire starter in case of those overnight trips that were unexpected. There's always the aches and pains to be found on the trail, sometimes the unexpected allergic reaction waiting in that beehive around the corner. So with that in mind, it's not a bad idea to have a waterproof container or a bag with over-the-counter medication that can take the edge off of a twisted ankle or stave off an allergic reaction when you're traveling to more definitive care. I added Benadryl onto this list as an assist to severe allergic reactions. Bee season is coming up, and if you've ever experienced anaphylaxis or severe allergic reactions, they can hit hard if you're not prepared for them. So foremost, I'd recommend bringing your EpiPen, know ahead. Allergies can surprise you. If you're not prepared, Benadryl can kind of slow down the effects while you're working towards more definitive care. Saline, I love this stuff. Clean water can be bought in small, flexible vials. They're ready to use and they clean cuts and scrapes before you bandage them. This can really help to get that gravel and dirt out of injuries before you cover them up. It helps with infection and helps you understand the severity and the extent of any injuries. And quick little ads here. Noisemakers are always fun to have. Bear bangers or whistles. They can be used if you're lost, to look for help, or to scare off any curious wildlife. Reflective tape and flyers. I always love seeing bikers with this because you can use them to alert other riders to oncoming people or to sort of mark off an emergency scene. And a big one that every good British Columbian should know about is safety blankets or extra clothes, especially an extra set of socks. Can mean the difference between a warm night of dry feet and insulated cover or wet toes and cold night air and the damp ground. Open it up here. It's just a quick list if anybody else has anything else they want to add or a favorite color of duct tape they want to throw in. So last few tips to having the right mindset to avoid injury. Try and choose tracks that you're already familiar with. Have someone with you there who's been there before to help you if it's a busy area. Also make sure to control your speed. Make sure you have time to react to someone or something if it's stopped on the trail. In case you come across with somebody in need of help, I know this is starting to look wordy here, even if you're not comfortable helping someone, you can be there to call for help, alert other riders coming your way, or direct medical services if they're on their way. One of the best ways to get help to where they need to be is to be aware of where you are. Make sure that you can be specific when you're talking to any emergency resources you're calling in. Let them know where you are and get a better idea of that situation as a whole. Worst case scenario, have someone else know where you are. So a little bit more, get into the exciting part here, applying this information to the real world by using our imaginations. And this is the beauty of Zoom right now. I'm going to take you through just a few scenarios, provide an example of how we can always be of help in an emergency if we go in prepared and go in planning ahead. So everybody in that calm space, imagine you're making a day trip to a familiar trail. It's popular in whatever local area you're in. You check the weather. It looks warm and sunny, maybe a little rain expected later on. You make a phone call to your regular person, letting them know when you're leaving, where you're going, and when you're going to be planning on being back. Wander out to the front yard, you do your equipment check, you go through your awesome first aid kit, making sure that everything is dry, well packed, familiar, secured on the bike. You grab the right clothes for the day, take a swig of water, pop on some sunscreen, and hit the day. You've been cycling for about 5 minutes. You're past the entrance to the trail. You check the map to see that you're right on time with the schedule. And as you take a turn and keep considerate of the few drivers you see, you come across the scene of a pretty obvious accident. Let's say the road turns sharply and someone just didn't quite catch it in time. So you see a bike bent and dirty on the ground with a rider next to it. What would you do next? Pause for dramatic effect. First and foremost, make sure that you are safe. Stop, get off the trail, check the environment, see if there's any danger that you can see, and be aware of any other riders. If you ever feel like you could be unsafe or that you're not prepared to help, find that help that you need. Call with your cell phone if you have one. Get one in self-service, make other riders stop, and if you need any other support, call 911 to get the people there. Make sure you're specific, again, with where you are, maybe what the injured person is experiencing, any other information that can be helpful to people coming into the situation, such as who the injured rider is, their name and their age, how exactly they've been injured, maybe information about the incident or the scene specifically about where you're at, anything that you've already done to help. And specifically, here we go again, where you can be found. Now to cover some emergencies that you come across together, I wanted to imagine just 3 quick and easy different scenarios to get over how you would react in each case. So first off, we have straightforward broken bones. We all have them, sometimes they break. As always, a person coming to help who is calm and has a plan is the one that injured people like to see headed their way. So stay calm, keep the injured person still until you can talk to them and figure out how exactly they're injured. Once you send for help or have 911 dispatch on your phone, check for injuries that could be bleeding or causing pain. It's important to stabilize broken bones so that you can minimize any damage made by moving ends. So if there's any bleeding, you have your handy compress bandages to cover wounds and help them clot. If you have bright red blood that won't stop after putting pressure on the wound, you have to consider using a tourniquet. It's an encircling pressure wrap that you place above the source of bleeding, moving up towards the center of the body. You can use your long sling bandages, your belt, your zip tie, any material that you can get very tight around the limb and tighten and secure it above the, so you can see my arm over here, tighten it above and secure above the actual source of the injury. This is, I gotta say it out loud, for arms and legs. We don't do this around the trunk or around the neck or anything. This is meant to stop bleeding from going off to the appendages. Next, it's also important to stabilize any broken limbs. You can use a splint, which is a stiff material placed alongside the broken bone. Attach it to the limb in order to keep it from moving with any bandages. Using sticks or poles, whatever you like, secure it to the injured person, stabilize it after the break. After providing basic first aid, remember to try, stay, wait for help. More damage can be done by walking on a broken leg than by waiting for people to safely transport you and your patient away from the scene. I feel like I'm going into first aid training here, but this is exactly what we're talking about. So let's say instead, that's scenario 1. You come around the corner to find out that your rider is laying flat on their back, helmet on, spread eagle across the trail. First off, let's call for help. That's by yelling or waving down a rider, calling on the phone. Be specific where you are. That's going to be going through everyone's head. How you can be found, be calling, checking in, and make sure that you look around for anything that could put you in danger. What you want to do is approach the person while yelling to see if they're going to respond to your approach. If you hear the rider say that their neck or back is hurting, or if you suspect that a head or back injury has occurred, you need to tell that injured person, let's not move. So try and ask them if they're in pain, where it hurts, and tell them to stay on their back. If someone has received a spinal injury, such as a broken bone, more damage can be done by moving with it than for waiting there stable, waiting for help to come to get you to the hospital. If you've taken a first aid course, you could be familiar with the C-spine or spinal control. This means moving to the head of the injured person, holding their head in a position of comfort and minimalizing any extra movement and then till they can be fully assessed for the damage. You could use bundled up clothes or bags to place on either side of the head to keep people from looking around. You want to keep the injured person talking, keep them warm with a blanket if you have handy. If they absolutely need to be moved to be kept safe, try and make sure that you're moving the whole body in line with the way that you're securing the head. Keep the person stabilized and keep your movements minimal. It's important to stay with that injured person and not leave them alone. The safe transport might be a little slower, but it's better than rushing and putting somebody at risk. All right, moving on to our worst case scenarios, but Anybody have a fun spinal injury story they wanted to throw in at this point? No, we'll save that for the Q&A. That's fine. So moving on, I'd like to talk about one of the most useful skills that you can have in really any situation, and that's the life-saving process of cardiopulmonary resuscitation, or CPR. Let's say that you arrive on site, you find an injured rider, as we did before, spread eagle across the trail and unresponsive to your shouting. What do you do first? First off, again, assess any dangers to yourself or other riders. Call for or send for help, again, keeping in mind how you would give specific directions to where you are. Then move in to check your unresponsive person. This is where that first aid training helps if you have it, just to be familiar with the process. I'm going to try to simplify the steps a little bit, but it's really nothing compared to an actual course, which I'd always recommend. If you approach and find that they've not responded to your voice or your touch, as in like trying to shake them and rouse them, carefully remove the helmet of the rider. Check for breathing, feel for a pulse on their neck. If you're looking for the carotid artery, you can take your two fingers and actually put it under the corner of the jawbone, so on the fleshy part there, and you can feel a soft pumping that shows the heart is working and that it's moving blood around. You can check for breathing by looking at the movement of their chest, moving your ears to their mouth, and listening for the air movement. Also, take a look inside of the mouth to make sure that there are no obstructions that are stopping the air from getting into their lungs. If you feel a pulse and they are breathing, move them into the recovery position and wait for help. If they're not breathing and you feel no pulse, it's time to perform CPR. So this is the sit back and get your popcorn moment. The next slide will be a really quick video example of how to provide just hands-only CPR. Please enjoy.
Start hands-only CPR. The first step is to send someone to call 911 or call 911 yourself. Then get directly over the victim. Put the heel of one hand in the center of the chest. Then put your other hand on top of the first. Then push hard and fast in the center of the chest until help arrives. It's important to push at a rate of at least 100 beats per minute, which is about the same tempo as the phone staying alive. Let's hope you never have to use hands-only CPR, but if you see a teen or adult suddenly collapse, don't be afraid to try it. Remember, call 911, then push hard and fast in the center of the chest until help arrives. Your actions can help to save a life. To learn more, call 877-888-4CPR or visit heart.org/hands-only CPR.
Wasn't that fun? Does everyone have a song stuck in their head now? So hands-only CPR is a life-saving technique that can be used without equipment until medical professionals arrive to assist. This can more than double the survival rate of someone whose heart has stopped working, and if properly performed, can move blood and air through the body to keep someone alive. So some considerations: remember to pump hard and pump fast. That's always what my instructors told me. Be sure to ask for help, since CPR performed properly can be very tiring. Even paramedics have protocols to switch during cycles of CPR in order to keep the compressions efficient and the speed at the proper level. You should be aiming for that 100 to 120 compressions per minute. As mentioned, it's the tempo for Staying Alive or whatever other song you can kind of get stuck in your head, but easy to be able to find the rhythm too. You need to make sure that your hands are stable and solid by interlocking your fingers as the image shows, and try to compress the middle of the chest about a third of the width of the body, or 5 to 10 centimeters depending on the width of the person, and to remove the pressure between the compressions to allow for the heart to actually open properly and move the blood and oxygen through the system. If you're the very first person performing CPR on someone, you may feel the breaking of the ribs and the cartilage on the chest wall. That's actually what you want to be able to simulate the proper movement of the heart. I would recommend also, again, joining a local CPR course. Do a little bit of research online. There's some great videos out there. Better your understanding. You can practice easily at home using pillows or rolled up blankets. So to touch on how to safely perform CPR while still protecting yourself and others from dangers involving COVID, I wanted to add some easily applied steps to yourself to make it more comfortable and make it more safe for everybody, so that we're still able to provide life-saving CPR. Before starting chest compressions on someone outside of your regular social circle, consider making sure that you're wearing a mask of your own. Putting on any medical gloves that you may have available, possibly even covering the mouth of the person that you're performing compressions on lightly. This is not smothering or putting a pillow over top of somebody. You still need them to get oxygen, but maybe even a mask or pulling up the collar of somebody's shirt over top of the mouth, so that way that we're not producing aerosols as we pump the lungs. Also important, I wanted to mention, make sure the person's back is on a hard and flat surface to be able to get effective compressions. Also, if you're able to call on a cell phone and talk to 911, consider putting it on speakerphone and next to the head of the person that having the compressions on them. It allows them to hear what's happening and allows you to sort of communicate better and get support for the efforts. So we're all on our way. I also wanted really quick, this is an important part of really good CPR, is actually utilizing a nearby automatic external defibrillator. This is a small machine. It actually recognizes certain heart rhythms and provides electrical stimulation to restart the heart muscle into beating in a regular rhythm. These can be found at various locations in your local area, grocery stores, hospitals, skating rinks, other public areas, especially around trails, I would hope. There are various locations. Try and take your time to familiarize yourself with the ones in your community specifically, and to be better prepared in case. So when you send for help or are sent for help and there's CPR currently in process, try to implement the AED into the process of resuscitation by powering it on and following the clear labeled instructions. They're automated, so they'll be written as well as verbal. When you turn them on, they'll give you a step-by-step instruction as to where to place the pads so that you have a line across the heart. If it requires you to stop compressions, it's to get a clear reading of the heart rate activity, so it's important not to touch the person as they're shocked. To simplify the message, if you come across anyone not breathing and unconscious, try to shout to get them to wake, phone 911. Don't be afraid to start CPR. If they aren't unconscious, they will absolutely let you know soon. Get an AED, continue to use strong and efficient compressions. So in summary, thank you so much for being a part of this today. I and I'm sure everybody here really appreciates your time coming in and listening to us. Hope it's been an educational, informative first start here to the webinar. Some points that we went over and that I hope you take home with you today is plan ahead for the type of trip that you're planning on taking. Create a light but efficient first aid kit and remember to take it along. Avoid injuries before they happen. Use your proper equipment. Be a courteous member of the cycling community. Be helpful to other riders in need. Be willing and ready to perform CPR when the need arises. So that's about it from me. Huge thank you to all the presenters and the audience members out there. My name again is Tyree Parkin, one of just a lot of us community paramedics around here working with BC Ambulance Services. I'm a big fan of safety plans. I appreciate the chance that you gave me to talk to you today. I hope you found the presentation helpful, informative. Let's open up to more than just my voice now. Thanks so much, guys.
Thanks so much, Tyree. That was absolutely fantastic. You covered some amazing content there. And what I love is it's a universal message. So this can apply to downhill skiing. This can apply to, you know, hanging out with your kids at the skate park. Like, you know, this can apply to, you know, just even walking on the sidewalk and pedestrian safety. So really everything you delivered there is a great universal message. And the key take home that I love was the hands-free CPR. During a pandemic, I can't think of a better approach. I know that's something that worries people is, you know, how do you deliver CPR during a pandemic? So that was excellent to get that really slow, or I guess that really succinct message. I think that's like the key take home, at least for me today. Before I
find being prepared really makes it efficient that way. Like making sure that you're comfortable with the approach there makes everything move that much more smoothly. So thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. So before we move on, I just want to check with Lauren or Matt Davey if you guys have anything you'd like to add, and if not, I'll introduce Lauren.
Yeah, I guess all I have to add to Tyree there is, again, the hands-only CPR is something I'm a qualified first aid personnel, and I get people asking me all the time in COVID, how do I do that? Or what if I don't know them? I'm not comfortable giving them mouth to mouth. And I think it's just really important. We see in movies and media all the time that CPR includes mouth to mouth, and so many people aren't comfortable with that and therefore think that they don't want to learn how to do CPR, or that CPR isn't something that they feel comfortable with. But that hands-only CPR can be so beneficial. So I'm just really glad to see that highlighted here today. But on that, great, good information. I'll talk a bit later about concussions and helmets, but maybe Matt has something to say.
Well, I concur. Really good information, Tyree. Excellent presentation. And I really appreciate the lead up there when you're talking about when you do go on some of these back roads, trails and stuff, making sure that you're well prepared. Some of the stuff that you include in your kit can certainly avoid getting into a difficult situation, particularly when we have some of the more remote trails that help can be a little bit time away. So just preparing ahead of time can increase your safety there for sure.
I realized I didn't give you the proper introduction there, Matt. So Matt is our Prevention and Community Safety Officer. So with a title like that, he's very well suited, meant for this presentation here. So Matt, I know your internet's freezing a little bit, but if you want to go ahead and just give us like maybe a top 10 list or just some of the really important things that you know, kind of are at the forefront of your job, and even going into Bike Week, what are some things, a message that you'd like to share here with our audience, which could be pretty universal? We might have some school kids watching this, and definitely quite a few members in the community here.
So leading up to this webinar this morning, I actually went out and I observed some cyclists yesterday just to get some points. And I watched a number of situations occur yesterday where I think people, they feel that they should be giving cars room. And I don't think that that's a good idea. I watched on King Street, for instance, a cyclist riding down on the right shoulder of the road while there were vehicles going in both directions. Because there's not an established bike lane there, I then at the four-way stop witnessed a vehicle turn right and almost cut that person off. If they chose to ride in the lane as though they were a vehicle, we can avoid those sorts of things from happening. It's okay to ride on the shoulder when there's an established bike lane there. But of course, 3rd Avenue is really our only established bike lane around town. And the other thing I noticed is, and to be honest, I've done this myself, when riding with young children, teaching them how to ride their bikes, I've noticed a lot of families choose to ride either on the very side of the road or on sidewalks even. And that in itself is kind of a big no-no, generally because of vehicles backing out of driveways and not having a clear view. I've seen a few close calls happen. Luckily, we haven't had anything major happen recently. But teaching youth to ride on the sidewalk is just starting them off on the wrong foot. So what I'd see happen is when people ride on the sidewalk, now you've chosen to ride as though you're a pedestrian. So you need to follow the rules of that a pedestrian would follow. If you're riding on the street, follow the rules of motorists. If you're riding on the sidewalk with small children, follow the rules for pedestrians. That means when you come to a four-way stop, you get off your bike, you wait for vehicles to stop, and you walk your bike across the crosswalk. 3 or 4 times yesterday at the four-way on King Street, I observed parents and children riding their bikes across the crosswalk. And one last thing I'll just say is we're such nice people here in Smithers. We want to just be so accommodating. I see a lot of people come up to the road and it's their turn to go as a biker, as a cyclist. But they do, no, it's okay, you go ahead. They wave cars ahead. I've seen it happen at crosswalks. I've seen it happen at four-way stops. And actually what that does is it's teaching bad drivers. We need all drivers to observe cyclists, just like they would if another car pulled up to that four-way. I wouldn't go if it were their turn to go. So it's important to ride with a sense of purpose, right? You belong on the road as much as that vehicle does. Don't wave people across. You're teaching bad habits to young drivers, right? They're like, oh, well, the last cyclist waved me on, so I guess I'll go. And then we have a collision. So anyway, that is my little piece for today. As you mentioned, Sheena, you and I believe Lauren will be doing some work with the elementary students in the Go by Bike Week. So very much looking forward to that. And I want to say thank you for inviting me to our little Zoom meeting today.
Fabulous. Thank you so much, Matt. We're going to bump over now to Lauren Dohler with the Northern Brain Injury Association, and I'll just give you a little bit of an intro here with Lauren. So she is the case manager, again, with the Northern Brain Injury Association. She works in the Bulkley Valley, providing support to survivors of brain injuries and their families. She has also facilitated and participates in educational sessions just like this we have today, providing information about brain injuries and rehabilitation after injury. So Lauren has been with the NBIA for over a year and works with a larger team of the Northern Health Region, I believe. So over to you, Lauren. Whatever you think you could add of value today to our conversation, and maybe just share a little bit of, what is it you do with brain injury prevention?
For sure, thanks, Sheena. So yeah, kind of going back to Matt's conversation there, the Northern Brain Injury Association does a road survey every year annually, where we get out on the streets and we sit on corners and we watch pedestrians, cyclists, motorists, and see how they all interact with each other on the streets. So those things that Matt was talking about there, we see time and time again. Another big one that we see that, especially with us here at Brain Injury, gets on our minds is parents biking with small children, and all the small children have helmets on and the parents do not, or the parent's helmet is on their handlebars. I saw 2 adults with helmets on their handlebars on my drive to work this morning, and it's a 5-minute drive to work. So we, with our injury prevention, especially around this time of year when bikes are coming out of storage, really focus on helmet safety and how to know that your helmet is right for you, and how to know that your kids' helmets still fit them, or when to replace your helmets, things like that. So quickly talking about helmets, big thing is that it's loose on the child's head, that it's not cutting off their circulation, but it doesn't rotate around their head. You want the top of the helmet to be 2 fingers above the eyebrow, and the straps to form a V around their ear, and then 1 finger in between the chin strap and the helmet. So we call that the 2V1 rule. And it's something that we talk about a lot with kids and adults and parents and things like that. And then the other thing that I want to quickly touch on here, aside from all the first aid stuff that Tyri kind of talked to us about, is concussions, concussion awareness, how to recognize a concussion, and what to do in a situation where a concussion might be present. So a big thing, first aid courses are great. They're really important. I think everyone should have a basic level of first aid, broken bones, CPR, all of that, but they so regularly skip over concussion. So finding some other program where you can focus specifically on concussion awareness is always beneficial. Big kind of things that I wanted to talk about is when to make sure that someone else is getting involved in the care of someone who has a concussion. So some big myths around concussions being that only a blow to the head can cause a concussion. That's the only time you're going to see them. That's not true. Anytime that the brain is moving within the skull, you can see a concussion occur. So this can be a fall and a hit to the head, but it can also be whiplash is the other common one, right? So things that you want to look for: loss of consciousness, sometimes there, sometimes not, dizziness, nausea, vomiting, all of those things are really important to look for. The big time that you want to make sure that someone else is getting involved in care is a loss of consciousness, repeated vomiting, or any severe neck or back pain. Otherwise, concussions can largely be treated from home as long as you're aware of how to do this. So this is, again, where it comes to getting educated. Big myth that comes up often is that you have to wake somebody up every 2 hours after they've had a concussion for the next 48 hours. This isn't true. We don't do this anymore. The first 4 hours, you want to be checking, making sure the person stays conscious. But after that, sleep is the most important thing in the first 24 hours. Make sure that they're still breathing, but don't be waking them up every 2 hours. Without that sleep, the brain doesn't have time to heal. Past that, the other big thing to remember is that helmets are super important. They really help prevent a lot of injuries, but concussion is not one of them. Concussion occurs just as commonly when someone's wearing a helmet as when they're not wearing a helmet. And so lots of people, when you fall off your bike and you hit your head and they're like, oh, they're wearing a helmet, they're going to be fine. Not true. Concussion is just as likely to be there as it would be if they're not wearing a helmet. So stopping and checking for those signs of concussion are really important. That's all I really have to say there. There's a million tools that are free, a million educational resources that are free on the internet. Getting out and learning about concussion, highly recommended because it is such a common injury, one of the most common injuries in physical activity or daily life. Also, you can always stop by our office. We're right off Main Street here. We have a ton of resources, a ton of educational information, and are always willing to get out into the community and do larger presentations about what to look for. Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much, Lauren. That was, again, some great information there. And again, one of the key take homes that I think you point out very nicely is that you can still have a concussion even wearing a helmet. And I know a lot of people have thought differently of that. So it's really nice that you summarized that for us today. I just want to thank our three speakers today again, Lauren, Matt, and Tyree. So if anything else you would like to add to the conversation, any last minute key take homes, now's your chance. Matt's got his hand up.
Lauren just keyed for me there. She invited people to come to the BB Brain Injury. I'd like to do the same for the community police office. We have we're located here at 3772B First Avenue, across from what used to be COB Bike Shop. And actually, one tip that I didn't put in there, of course, is make sure that you're seen. So if you stop by and say hi, we've got a bunch of different reflectors and stuff here, some of which are even good for holding your pant leg out of your chain. So if you're short of any of those reflector, we've got piles of them here. So stop in and we'll load you up.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much, Matt. Yeah, we'll definitely encourage people to come check out your office. And Tyree, you're a little ways out of town in Grand Isle, but we can always...
I am, but I did mention earlier, the community paramedic program with BC Ambulance has been running for about, I believe, 4 years so far. And it's within a lot of these rural and remote communities. And we love doing stuff like this, the community outreach, the health and wellness, the health clinics. We are out and enjoying being a part of the community. And it's great when stuff like this still happens around the COVID. Like, we're still able to gather and get some good information out to a ton of people. So thank you, Sheena, for all the effort you've put into making this happen here. It's fantastic to gather around everyone.
Well, on that note,
it's been a pleasure.
On that note, I want to take a moment just to mention our sponsors. So High Tech Drilling here in the community of Smithers, and our partners, the Rotary Club, that just jumped on this year to help support Smithers Bikes, as well as the town of Smithers. So these key partners and sponsors have really helped out. And then provincially, if you have a look here at our poster, the province of BC is the one that supports GoByBike BC Society, Big Bear Software, Exodus Travels, ICBC. So these are some key partners in the province that help cycling events like this happen in the different communities. So a huge thank you to our local and provincial sponsors. And we wish you all safe cycling as we move into Go By Bike Week coming up, May 31st to June 6th. And reach out to myself, Lauren, Matt, or Tyree if you have any follow-up or any questions or want to connect with us or outreach in some way. So thanks again, everybody. Have a great day.